Ah, there in that magnificent mountain pass, the seeds of a resistance that would echo through history were about to be sown. It was 480 BC, and the Greek lands were shaking under the footsteps of the vast army of Persian Emperor Xerxes. The Greek city-states had to come together against this approaching storm. But uniting wasn't easy, as the jealousies and rivalries between the different Greek states made it tough to stand as one against the enemy. Yet here, at a narrow pass called Thermopylae, a king and just 300 Spartan soldiers would rise to represent the courage of all the Greek people, brandishing their swords against the towering Persian army before them. And one of those kings was King Leonidas, strong, resolute, and faithful. His name would never be forgotten throughout history. Leonidas and his 300 brave warriors stood firm against countless enemies, ready to fight for the honor, faith, and freedom of their nation. Yes, this might have been an end, but it was also a beginning. Get ready, because now we'll witness the journey of those brave hearts, their immortal resistance, and the deep marks left behind by Thermopylae. All right then, close your eyes, young ones, and let me take you back to that time. In those ancient days, when even the wind smelled of history, the Greek city-states thrived under the rule of freedom. But that peace was about to be overshadowed by a terrifying threat rising behind the mountains. Slowly advancing to the west was a massive force, the Persian Empire, filled with the desire to dominate Greek lands. At the helm was King Xerxes, also known as the great ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty. Xerxes was embarking on this campaign not just to conquer, but to finish the work his father Darius had left undone. Expanding his power was more than just a goal. It was a matter of honor for him. Imagine this: as the leader of those vast Persian lands that birthed kings and emperors, he aimed to take one step further. But this time he didn't want an ordinary victory. He wanted a triumph that would echo through the ages. His eyes were set on the west, because that was where the pinnacle of his conquests would be, and the Persian sun would rise over Greece. The Greek city-states weren't just pieces of land for the Persians. No, they were stubborn people known for their passion for freedom, who would never surrender their territories. If Xerxes took that land, he wouldn't just expand his borders, he would engrave his name as the greatest conqueror in history. And so preparations for the campaign to the west began. The Persian army, ready to swell like a massive ocean, awaited with great determination. Thousands of soldiers, cavalry units, long spears stretching as far as the eye could see, and those fearsome archers were all under the command of the Persian king, ready to rain arrows upon Greek lands. Xerxes' army was equipped to the point where it could almost bring paradise down to earth. Who could stand against such a powerful force? Ah, dear young ones, such fear and concern arose in the Greek lands that the leaders of the cities came together. From Sparta to Athens, everyone had one question on their minds: could the Persians be stopped? As Xerxes' name spread like a storm, it became clear that a tough struggle for independence was inevitable. When the sun rose over the Persian Empire, its shadow was now falling on Greek lands, igniting a flame in everyone's hearts to fight against that shadow. Yes, dear young ones, as the sounds of war began to echo across the Greek lands, a wave of unity and movement stirred among the Greek city-states. You see, at that time, Greece wasn't a single united nation. Each city-state had its own laws, culture, and leaders. While Athens was known for its democracy, Sparta was recognized for its military discipline. The differences in power and governance among these city-states sometimes sowed seeds of friendship, and at other times, competition. Each one was independent. They aimed to outdo each other rather than come together. But the Persian threat was so great and so close that they had to rise above all these differences. The idea of free Greek lands falling into enemy hands was an unimaginable disaster for every Greek. They had to come together to create a glimmer of hope against Xerxes' enormous army. My friends, they had to prepare for a joint resistance. This unity represented an unprecedented alliance for the Greek people. Even cities like Athens and Sparta, which had very different ways of life, agreed to stand shoulder to shoulder for a common purpose. The Athenians brought their clever strategies and naval power, while the Spartans contributed their solid shields and iron discipline to form a formidable force. The goal wasn't just to defend, it was to survive, protect their independence, and keep the Greek spirit alive forever. This alliance symbolized the honor and freedom of the Greek people, and of course it had to start from the best place, Thermopylae. Thermopylae, rising like a natural fortress along the shores of the Aegean Sea. This narrow pass was a gift that geography had given to the Greek people. You see, the Thermopylae pass was so narrow that it was impossible for large armies to advance through it. This was a strategic point where even the small Greek forces could stand firm against the massive Persian army. If the Persians could be stopped from passing through this pass, it would be that much harder for them to reach the heart of Greece. There couldn't be a better spot to halt Xerxes' army. Just like a small but brave group of guards hiding behind a door, Greek warriors could stand and fight against a giant enemy here. That's why Thermopylae meant so much more to the Greek people than just a piece of land. So, the city-states once again joined their forces and made their decision. The Persian army would be stopped here, and Xerxes' entry into Greece would be blocked at this narrow pass. The Thermopylae Pass was the last bastion of freedom, my friends. Those who would resist there would protect not just the Greek lands, but also the belief of the Greek people in freedom. And at the forefront of this path would step the legendary leader Leonidas, leading the 300 Spartans. These heroes, sworn to fight to the death, would defend this pass to the last breath to protect their lands and people. Remember, young ones, that pass would become more than just a battlefield, it would become a symbol of freedom. And that flame of freedom was ready to shine against Xerxes' army right there at Thermopylae. Leonidas, the legendary king of Sparta, an unshakable leader, a figure as strong as a mountain in the eyes of his people. His life was one of those stories every child growing up in the harsh climate of Sparta heard, because his guidance, courage, and wise warrior spirit were not just a legend, but the very essence of reality. Leonidas was the embodiment of this land and its people. My friend's a warrior king, and a determined leader ready to face any challenge for the good of his people. His heart carried the strength and character of his nation, which is exactly why he was chosen to stand against the Persian threat. So what was Leonidas' choice? With the Persian Empire knocking at their door, Leonidas selected the bravest, strongest, and most resilient 300 men from his people. You see, for Sparta, 300 wasn't just a number. These warriors were the most skilled soldiers, reflecting the essence, spirit, and dedication of Sparta. In making his selection, Leonidas chose not only those with strong bodies, but also those with strong hearts. Because war wasn't just fought with swords, it was fought with courage, dear friends. These brave warriors had been trained since childhood in discipline and commitment, developing ironclad wills through rigorous training. Behind this choice lay Sparta's own culture and warrior tradition. Sparta was a society raised on military discipline. Young boys left their families at a young age to be trained as warriors. This training shaped not only their bodies but their spirits as well. That's why Sparta had such a powerful and warrior reputation among the Greek city-states. For them, war was life itself. Death was not a fear but a noble fate. The 300 Spartans chosen by Leonidas were living examples of this tradition, each swearing to fight to their last breath. These soldiers knew the true cost of freedom. Their spirits were forged with the strength of the land and its people. Leonidas made a promise, not just to himself but to his people. They would stand against the Persians and defend this pass at Thermopylae to the very end. This group of 300 men, gathered to resist Xerxes' countless soldiers, walked into battle with not a drop of fear in their eyes. As their red capes fluttered behind them, it was as if each of them had already accepted what death meant. For them, death wasn't a defeat. On the contrary, it was the bravest step to take for freedom, the greatest honor to be earned. Young ones, imagine those 300 Spartans standing around their leader, just like iron being shaped in the fire, forming a shield around him. and Leonidas walked at the front, heading to meet fate itself. These 300 chosen warriors were all ready to give their lives for their people, and their choice was proof not only of their physical strength but also of their hearts and dedication. Behind these 300 men, there might not have been an army, but in their hearts lay the strength of an entire nation. Thus, step by step, they advanced toward battle. This was how the legend of Thermopylae was born, from their dedication. As Leonidas and his chosen 300 warriors left the streets of Sparta, the people poured out to see them off. This wasn't just an ordinary journey. Everyone knew that there was no turning back from this path. With unwavering determination in his eyes, Leonidas set out. Spear in one hand and shield in the other, he carried the pride of Sparta, the courage of his people, and their honor on his shoulders. The 300 warriors marching alongside him showed neither fear nor hesitation in their eyes. They represented the bravest spirits of Greece. They stepped forward on this journey for the sake of freedom, leaving behind their families, friends, and children. Other support units from the Greek city-states were also preparing to meet at the Thermopylae Pass. Alongside Sparta, soldiers from Athens, Thespiae, and other Greek city-states had come together against a common enemy. They were brothers united not by blood but by ideals. In each of their hearts burned a fire eager to put an end to the invasion of the Persian Empire. Especially the warriors from Athens carried the pride of having defeated the Persians at the Battle of Marathon, and now they felt ready to defend the freedom of the Greek people once again against this new threat. As Leonidas and the 300 Spartans advanced toward Thermopylae, military discipline was at its peak, but there was a sense of calm in their hearts and a deep determination on their faces. In the evenings, when they set up camp, they would gather around the fire, and without fear of the death that the upcoming battle might bring, they laughed and joked with one another. Many had embarked on this journey alongside childhood friends and brothers. Everyone knew that in Sparta, fear was merely another name for weakness on the battlefield, and if there was anything more sacred than victory for a Spartan, it was a noble death. For them, victory and death pointed to the same path, and under Leonidas's leadership, each of them had accepted this path. Conversations around the fire would occasionally be interrupted by smiles filled with childhood memories or by a solemn silence. In the lead up to the impending battle, rumors about the size of the Persian army spread through the camp. Despite these rumors, Leonidas's presence reassured all the soldiers. For the troops coming from other Greek city-states, Leonidas's character was a source of inspiration. The courage of fighting alongside him strengthened their hopes, reminding them that the resistance that would take place at Thermopylae was a sacred duty dedicated to the freedom of all Greek people. Leonidas and his men carried the weight of this mission with every breath and vowed to charge forward without fear of death when the moment came. And so, when the news arrived that the vanguard of the Persian army had been spotted, Leonidas and the other Greek warriors were already bearing both the fear of that great battle and the honor of victory within them. As they continued to march, each of them walked with the knowledge that they would defend that narrow pass against the Persian army like a shield. Ah, my friends, let's turn our eyes to the east. The king of Persia, Xerxes, who ruled over vast lands and declared himself a god-king, was marching his army into Greek territory. Behind Xerxes was perhaps the most massive and colorful army in the history of the world. This army, stretching as far as the eye could see, reflected the wealth and greatness of the Persian Empire. The soldiers spoke different languages and carried different weapons from various nations. At the front of the warrior ranks, armor and banners that represented the spirits of different peoples were fluttering in the wind. Xerxes' army was so large that, according to rumors, they could drain the waters of a river in just a few hours. At the heart of the army were the heavily armored Persian infantry, fully clad in armor and equipped with spears. Alongside them were soldiers from distant lands. The Bactrians, wild-looking warriors with meticulously braided beards, had come to fight for the Persians out of loyalty. Meanwhile, the Indian warriors, with their dazzling outfits and shields, and their massive archers and heavy chariots, greatly enhanced the splendor of this army. Each soldier was eager to showcase Xerxes' power and bring the enemy to their knees at a single sign from him. This army was more than just a show of military might, it was a mosaic of an empire, with every soldier there to pledge their loyalty to Xerxes. As Xerxes approached the pass at Thermopylae, his expectations were crystal clear. This small Greek force wouldn't stand a chance against his massive army. They would bow down with just one move from him. In his eyes, the Greek city-states were tiny groups constantly fighting among themselves, incapable of uniting. The idea that such a small force would dare to resist him in such a narrow pass like Thermopylae was laughable. Still, he questioned his advisors, trying to gather information about the region and understand what these Greeks aimed to achieve with their resistance. Who knows, maybe this small army was stubborn enough to really stand in the way of the Persian Empire's advance. As Xerxes eagerly awaited his army's arrival at Thermopylae, his mind was filled with thoughts of victory celebrations, those moments when Greek lands would bow before him. He was confident victory was just a matter of time for him. No matter who the Greek soldiers waiting in that pass were, they would have no chance against the glory of the Persian army. In the name of Xerxes they would kneel. But, oh my friends, there was one thing that King Xerxes overlooked. In front of him stood not just an army, but a community filled with independent spirits, sworn to fight for their freedom. And he did not yet know that the rock-solid resistance he would encounter upon reaching Thermopylae carried a meaning far stronger than the size of his own army. Ah, my dear friends, the moment has finally come. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, the magnificent Persian army clashed for the first time with the steel-willed Greek forces. Xerxes, full of confidence, expected to sweep aside the small Greek contingent with his massive army in that tight space. But on that day at Thermopylae, there was a unity clad not just in armor but in courage. Under Leonidas' leadership, the Greeks had established a defense line as solid as a rock. As the first cries of battle echoed, the Persian soldiers flooding the pass quickly realized just how relentless the resistance they were about to face truly was. The Persian army advanced in waves, but all they faced was what seemed to be just 300 Spartans. However, this was no ordinary unit. Each warrior was ready to dance with death. Whenever the Persians attacked, the Spartans formed a shield wall, meeting the enemy with stunning discipline, standing firm against the ocean of Persians. Fighting in such a narrow area didn't just require numbers, it demanded individual courage and resilience. That's why Leonidas and his men moved as one body, repelling every attack the enemy launched. Ah, my dear friends, just think for a moment. Behind their shields, as the fierce Persian assaults were repelled, every Spartan wore an expression that shone with unwavering faith. For them, retreat was not an option. The Thermopylae Pass was their home, their grave, and their most sacred battlefield. The Spartans were practically challenging the Persians, employing carefully chosen strategies in their fight. The Greek tactics began to inflict heavy losses on the Persians. The narrowness of the pass made their defenses even more effective, continuously wearing down the enemy. In those first clashes, part of the Persian army was taken aback. They hadn't expected such resistance. They attacked again, only to be pushed back once more. With every wave of assault, Xerxes' army crashed against the Greeks' iron will, breaking apart like a massive tide crashing against a huge rock. Xerxes had easily won every battle he commanded up to that point, but witnessing the Greeks hold back even his colossal army in that narrow pass tested his patience. And those initial clashes declared the strength of the Greek defense to the whole world. The Spartans engaged in maneuvers that surprised the Persians, fighting with both physical strength and clever strategies. Every move they made was filled with a cunning and bravery that turned the enemy's expectations upside down. Xerxes's grand dreams of conquest came crashing down against the impenetrable wall of the Greeks during that first conflict. At the Thermopylae Pass, a handful of men burned with the fire of freedom, growing the fear in the eyes of the Persians with each clash. Ah, my dear friends, we are now approaching perhaps the most striking and epic moments of this battle. Leonidas and those 300 Spartans stood like heroes defying death, refusing to take a single step back as the Persian assaults came relentless and unending. This battle wasn't just about defending a pass, no. It was a battleground where their wills, beliefs, and love for their homeland clashed. Leonidas was not just the king of this army, he was their source of inspiration and guidance. You could see the fiery determination shining like embers in the eyes of the warriors. Because Leonidas taught them not only the art of war, but also the value of living and dying for these lands. As Leonidas dashed from one attack to another, he addressed his soldiers like a father speaking to his children. "If we stand here, Greece will live," he declared. His words sank deep into each Spartan, strengthening them even more. There was an unshakable resolve in Leonidas's gaze. His soldiers could see this determination and realized they were writing their own tales of immortality under his leadership. The attacks were getting fiercer, and the Persian army kept coming, yet each Spartan showed such resilience against these assaults that they seemed more like solid rocks than human beings. For them, retreating or surrendering was never an option. They formed a united front, holding their shields like a wall to face the enemy. The Persians were bewildered. How could such a small number of soldiers display such strong resistance? The Spartans' fighting tactics were just as impressive as they were. They would pretend to retreat for a moment. Then, after trapping the enemy in the narrow pass, they would launch forward like an arrow. Each of their attacks sent shockwaves through the Persian army. Whenever the Persians charged in with hope, they found themselves facing this unit that stood like a fortress. The Spartans weren't silent in battle. They yelled and shouted with a battle rhythm, encouraging each other while intimidating the enemy with their war cries. Leonidas, as a leader who kept them a step ahead, always found the best strategy against each attack and instilled the courage they needed. Despite the unending waves of enemy assaults, the Spartans never wavered. With every new wave of attack, Leonidas repeated his powerful words that lifted them up in this land. "We will honor our oath." Ah, in those moments, even the Persian soldiers began to grasp the magnitude of the Greek resistance. They faced not just fighting soldiers, but symbols of a people bound to their freedom and honor. For the Spartans, this battle was much more than a matter of life and death. They had sworn to carry on this resistance as a testament to their faith, determined to change the course of history. Ah, my dear friends, now we're about to witness those dark moments, the heart-wrenching betrayal that changed the course of the war, the treachery of Efialtes. Until that time, the narrow pass had stood strong, guarded by the unwavering faith of the Greeks. But here, at this very spot, one of history's most painful betrayals lay hidden in the heart of a traitor who would collaborate with the enemy. The name of that traitor was Efialtes. According to accounts, he was a man consumed by jealousy and fear. His love for his homeland had melted away under the shadow of his own self-interest. Without a moment's hesitation, he had gone to the Persians, revealing a secret path that would allow the massive army to strike from behind the defenders of the pass. Imagine, even back then, the number of people who knew about this path was almost non-existent, yet Efialtes had chosen to use this information as a bargaining chip instead of keeping it to himself. When the Persians heard this news, their eyes lit up. They believed they had found a golden opportunity for victory. They began preparations to move hundreds of men silently along the hidden path. And so, my friends, Leonidas and his loyal 300 Spartans were caught completely off guard by such betrayal. They neither expected it, nor could they have imagined it. That night, the heavy footsteps of the Persians began to pass through the secret path, slowly surrounding the Greek forces at the pass. When morning came and the first rays of sunlight hit, Leonidas sensed the new situation. There was determination in his and his men's eyes. Retreating or surrendering was not an option. They gripped their swords tightly and prepared for battle, readying themselves for an even fiercer resistance. The betrayal had created such a deep rift within the Greek ranks that the pass was no longer a place of hope, but had become a site of martyrdom. And so, my friends, as the end approached for Leonidas and his 300 heroes, Efialtes etched his name into history forever as a traitor. His betrayal not only changed the course of the war, but also opened one of the deepest wounds a nation would remember. Yet the resilience of Leonidas and the courage shown by the 300 in the face of this betrayal would never be forgotten. That heroic spirit would overshadow this treachery for all time. Now we remember all these events with a deep breath, because even the most glorious resistances in history are tested by such dark stains. Ah, my dear friends, get ready to witness one of the most glorious moments in history, the purest and most untainted form of courage. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, the last stand of Leonidas and his men had turned the world's gaze toward this tight corridor. Know that this final stand was not just a battle, it was a moment of defiance against death, a meeting of honor by sacrificing life. As the Persians deceitfully circled around them and the trap tightened, Leonidas didn't think for a second about retreating. He was fully committed to making one last heroic stand with his men. When that moment came, Leonidas looked into the eyes of his weary but fiercely spirited warriors. He said words that perhaps no one else would dare to speak. "My friends," he said, "we did not come here to turn back, we came here to leave behind a free Greece." They didn't take a single step back. The warriors' bodies were worn out, their armor battered, their shields dented, yet each of them was ready for battle, a fire ignited in their eyes. They were set to sign their names in history with a resistance that would echo through time, ready to give their lives for the land they loved. And there were those final moments of the battle. The Persians were overwhelmingly numerous. They attacked from every direction, but Leonidas and his men stood firm like rocks. They were aware of death, yet they also knew how precious that death was. Each strike might take their last breath, but they each regarded this fight as a matter of honor, a legacy to uphold. Swords clashed in the air, and the blood-soaked warriors fought with relentless courage until their very last breath. As the enemy surged wave after wave, Leonidas let out one final victory cry and smiled at his men. That smile ignited hope in their hearts, because this battle was not just for Greek lands, it was fought for the sacred symbol of freedom. And this resistance had the power to turn death itself into victory. That day, the Thermopylae Pass overflowed with their sacrifice and bravery. Though the Persian army may have seemed to defeat them, the true victors in that pass were those heroes who believed in freedom and gave their lives for it. Leonidas and his 300 left behind the most noble moments in history, writing a saga of the greatest sacrifice with their final battle. And as we tell this legendary story once more, a fire burns in our hearts with their courage, because we know that true heroes remain immortal like this. Ah, Thermopylae. That narrow pass is no longer just made of stones and dirt. Oh no. Now it holds the spirit of Leonidas and the shadow of those 300 brave men. After Thermopylae, all of Greece was shaken by a completely different victory beyond the war it lost. Just think about it, the courage and resistance these heroes showed with only 300 men against thousands of Persian soldiers. For the entire Greek people, this pass represented more than just a battlefield. It became a symbol of freedom, honor, and never backing down. This battle left indelible marks on the hearts of the Greeks. Farmers, merchants, and ordinary people had all changed their perspectives on war. It was as if each of them became a soldier of Leonidas, each one became an heir to Thermopylae. Because they knew that freedom was built not just with the land won, but also with lives lost and promises kept. The courage shown at Thermopylae spread like wildfire, reaching every city and every home, empowering these people even more. This resistance became a source of inspiration for all of Greece's future battles. Now, in every fight against the Persians, no matter how large the enemy was, they would see that determination in the eyes of Greek warriors. Each soldier would feel a connection to the legacy left by Leonidas. After this battle, the bonds between the Greek city-states tightened even more. A strong desire arose to come together and act as one force. Because the Greeks understood that they needed to fight together not just against the enemy but also to protect their honor and their heritage. The losses the Persian army suffered in the face of this magnificent resistance echoed throughout the world. The name of Thermopylae was whispered not just in Greece but in distant lands as well. Everyone was talking about the story of these 300 men. Everyone wondered how a handful of soldiers dared to stand up to such a massive army. This legendary victory became an everlasting lesson in heroism, sharpening the belief in freedom for future generations. And so Thermopylae became not just a battle but the source of future victories, the birth of heroes, and the songs of triumph that would be sung. The legacy they left would resonate in every battle fought for freedom. Because some victories may seem lost, but they leave marks in the hearts that last forever. Ah, Leonidas and those 300 Spartans. This legend isn't just a story of a people's bravery. It's an unforgettable symbol of resistance and sacrifice etched deep into the pages of human history. What happened at Thermopylae didn't remain a simple event in Greek culture. No, it became almost a sacred legacy, a tale passed down from generation to generation, told around the fire, a saga that every generation remembers and learns from. Over time, these selfless men transformed from mere mortals into almost divine figures. Leonidas's determination and the indomitable spirit of those 300 men became embedded in the very heart of Greek society. This heroism taught future generations not only how to stand up to the enemy, but also reminded them of their own identity, values, and dignity. The story of those who gave their lives for freedom spread throughout every corner of Greece, circulating from mountain villages to city squares. Over time, Leonidas and his men became figures that children heard about in stories and young people looked up to on the battlefield. These warriors weren't just soldiers, they embodied freedom and dedication. Think about it, this story has profoundly influenced not only Greek culture but world history as well. Throughout the ages and across cultures, the resistance of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans has been retold and remembered with admiration. From Europe to Asia, from ancient times to the modern era, they are hailed as the purest example of resistance. These men taught humanity that hope and courage know no bounds, and that one should fight with honor even in the face of the impossible. The echoes of this legendary battle continue to resonate not just on the battlefield but in people's minds. In every tough time, in every moment of despair, the spirit of those 300 men kept inspiring strength in others. People found new resolve in their memories and rose up again. Thus, the resistance that took place at the Thermopylae Pass became an eternal symbol of a people's struggle for freedom. Ah, my friends, this is why the legacy of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans is more than just a memory of a battle. It's a story that pushes the boundaries of the human spirit, elevates it, and transforms it into a tale of heroism that will be remembered forever. As time goes on, this legend may change in the telling and perhaps new details will be added, but its essence will never change. Because the legacy they left behind will always stand as the greatest monument to human dignity and courage, not just in times of war. Of course, as we approach the conclusion, I'll take my time and continue to share my thoughts with a deep breath. Let's remember together the stories I've heard about those days, those times, and the echoes of those ancient battles. And here we are, dear friends, at the end of one of history's mightiest tales, after so many legends, blood, and tears. Leonidas and his men may have left their bodies on the battlefield, but their spirits are still there, at the pass of Thermopylae, carried by the wind and echoing through time. Rather than forgetting their memory, time has only magnified it. Whenever someone stands up for freedom, whenever someone raises their voice for justice, the spirit of those 300 warriors comes alive. It resonates like a battle cry. Because their legacy has found its place not only on Greek soil but in every corner of world history. Yes, the battle is over, but its story will never end. Even today, we continue to tell it and remember it. We shout to the world that no power can ever completely crush a people's determination and belief. That's why the legacy of Leonidas and the 300 Spartans is not just a story from a bygone era, but an epic that will live on forever. Their courage inspires us and their faith guides us. Now, as we leave this story behind, we will carry their heroism, sacrifice, and the lessons they've taught us within ourselves. As we build our tomorrows, we will draw inspiration from their courage and use their determination as our guide. And so we conclude the telling of this immortal tale right here, at least for now. But remember, this is not the end. It's a story that will start anew with every challenge. Now it's time to bring this legend that inspires us into our lives, to be worthy bearers of their memory. So, my friends, as we reach the end of this journey, we honor them once more. Don't forget, the generations that come after us will tell this story too. Because the real legend belongs to those who leave behind an unforgettable legacy.